All right, let's dive right in. What if I told you that the two deadliest wars in all of human history weren't really two separate wars at all? What if they were actually just one long 30-year conflict with a brief, fragile pause in the middle? In this session, we're going to analyze that exact idea, the chain of causation that connects everything in this era of global conflict. We're going to trace the path from these old, crumbling empires all the way to a world split in two by the Cold War.
So, here's our learning plan for today. We're going to break this down into 5 key parts. We'll start with the crumbling world order, move through World War I, that flawed peace, and then into World War II and its atrocities. By the end of this, you'll be able to construct a solid argument explaining how all these monumental events are fundamentally linked. And that's a skill that's not just going to help you on the AP exam, it's going to help you understand the world we're living in right now.
Okay, so let's set the stage. As we roll into the 20th century, the world is on a knife's edge. The big land-based empires that had been around for centuries, the Ottomans, the Russians, the Qing dynasty in China, they were really starting to show their age. They were decaying from the inside, creating this massive power vacuum that was just begging to be filled with chaos.
And this map right here is a perfect snapshot of that decay. Just look at the Ottoman Empire. For years, people had been calling it the sick man of Europe. And you can see why. It's losing its grip on all this territory in the Balkans right before World War I kicks off. This area becomes a total tinderbox of nationalism, with all these different ethnic groups dreaming of having their own nations.
So how did Europe get to this breaking point? Well, historians have this super handy acronym to help us remember the long-term causes, MAIN. M is for militarism. Think of it as a massive arms race, everyone building bigger armies and navies. A is for alliances, this tangled web of treaties that basically split Europe into 2 armed camps. I is for imperialism, that frantic scramble for colonies and resources that pitted all the major powers against each other. And finally, N is for nationalism, this really intense, aggressive patriotism that was tearing empires apart from the inside out.
And this map just shows you how dangerous that division was. You've got the Allied powers in green and the Central powers in purple. This system was so rigid that it basically guaranteed that any little spark, any regional conflict, would set off a domino effect, dragging the entire continent into war. And that's exactly what happened after the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Okay, time for you to think like a historian. Go ahead and pause the video. I want you to think about those 4 MAIN causes and decide which one you think was the most significant factor. There's no single right answer here, but the key is to back up your claim with evidence. For instance, you could argue nationalism was the main driver because it fueled both the internal decay of empires and the external rivalries between nations. Go on, give it a shot.
So the assassination was the spark, and the MAIN causes were the powder keg. But what came next, what made the explosion so catastrophic, was the fact that this was a completely new kind of war. This was total war, and it was about to change everything.
Just look at this image. This is what was left of a forest on the Western Front. It's just a hellscape. This is what trench warfare and new military technology did. It turned vibrant landscapes into these muddy, crater-filled wastelands. It was a kind of destruction that no one had ever seen before.
And this new kind of conflict gets a name: total war. This is a huge concept for this unit, so let's be clear on what it means. It's a war where the entire society is mobilized. Every person, every factory, every resource is directed towards the war effort. And crucially, the line between soldier and civilian completely blurs. Everyone is part of the war, and everyone is a potential target.
The impact of total war was felt everywhere. Governments took over economies. They used propaganda to shape public opinion. Millions of soldiers were brought in from colonies in Africa and Asia to fight for their imperial rulers. And with so many men away at the front, women flooded into the workforce, taking on jobs in factories and farms, completely changing their role in society forever.
So after 4 years of unimaginable slaughter, the war finally ends. The world is at peace. Or is it? Because in one of history's most tragic ironies, the treaty that was supposed to guarantee peace would actually become the direct cause of the next, even bigger war.
Just look at the disconnect on this slide. The Treaty of Versailles had all these idealistic goals, lasting peace, self-determination, but the reality was so different. The infamous war guilt clause forced Germany to accept all the blame for the war, which was deeply humiliating. And the punishment didn't stop there.
Germany was hit with reparations payments of around $33 billion, an absolutely impossible sum. To try and pay it, the German government just started printing money,
which led to hyperinflation so bad that people's life savings became worthless overnight. This economic disaster created the perfect breeding ground for extremist ideas, like the poisonous stab in the back myth, this lie that Germany wasn't actually defeated, but was betrayed by its own politicians.
And this wasn't just happening in Germany. The whole world was unstable. The Great Depression brings the global economy to its knees. The new League of Nations, which was supposed to prevent future wars, turns out to be totally toothless, unable to stop Japan or Italy from invading other countries. And into this vacuum of power and hope step these new, aggressive totalitarian ideologies, fascism, Nazism, promising to restore national greatness through any means necessary.
Okay, let's practice another key AP skill. Pause the video and try to write a single, solid thesis statement that connects the Treaty of Versailles to the outbreak of World War II. Remember, a good thesis makes a clear, defensible argument. You could try something like, although intended to secure peace, the Treaty of Versailles' punitive terms and economic penalties destabilized Germany, fostering a climate of resentment that directly enabled the rise of aggressive ideologies and led to a second global conflict. Go ahead and craft your own.
And with that, the stage was set for Act 2. You really can't think of World War II as a totally separate event. It's more like the continuation of the First War, a final, horrifying settling of scores that were left unresolved back in 1918.
And if the causes of World War II look familiar, well, they should. It's a direct echo of everything we just talked about. The disastrous peace treaty, the global economic crisis, the renewed imperial ambitions of countries like Japan, Italy, and of course, Nazi Germany, which saw war and conquest as their nation's destiny.
This timeline really maps out that road back to war. You see Hitler coming to power in 1933, then a series of aggressive moves that went unchallenged. Then finally the invasion of Poland in 1939, and that's it. The world is at war again.
But this war was different. It was even more total, and it was driven by ideologies of hate. It was defined by mass atrocities against civilians on an unimaginable scale. And at the dark heart of it all was the Holocaust, the systematic industrial-scale genocide of 6 million Jewish people. And we have to be clear, this wasn't just some tragic side effect of the war. For the Nazis, it was a central goal of the war.
So, we've seen this descent into darkness twice in just a few decades. How do we make sense of it all? The key, and this is so important for AP World, is to stop seeing these as separate events and start seeing them as links in a chain of cause and effect. Each event is a consequence of what came before it and a cause of what came next.
And this slide lays out that tragic chain perfectly. You start with the crumbling world order. That leads to the explosion of World War I. The flawed peace treaty that ends it creates deep resentment. That resentment, combined with economic collapse, fuels the rise of fascism, and that in turn leads directly to an even deadlier World War II. It's one long, connected story.
And the chain doesn't even stop there. The end of World War II just forges the next link. The old European empires are shattered for good, and rising from the ashes are two new superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. The end of this hot war is the direct cause of the next great global conflict, the Cold War.
This quote gets at how the system in place in 1914 made a world war almost inevitable. So for your own self-assessment, think about this. What was the most significant continuity in how global conflicts were fought between 1914 and 1945? Was it the technology, the ideologies, or that concept of total war itself? Think about how that thread connects the whole period.
And that leads us to one final, big question to chew on. Was the Cold War just the next logical, inevitable link in the chain, or could a different outcome at the end of World War II, a different kind of peace, have prevented another 50 years of global tension? There's no easy answer, but asking questions like that is what doing history is all about.